ado, I will turn it over to our best prepared presenters yet, Nina Freeman, Aaron Freedman, which is a different last name, and Diego Garcia, who are going to tell you a little bit, I think, about themselves, but also about the new game that we commissioned this year called Grass Stains.
Clapping for ourselves. Let's go.
Thank you.
Hello. Ooh. Our entire preparation is pictures of us as kids, because this is a game about when we were kids, basically.
Yeah, I think it's good to have these on screen because a lot of the time that I spent working on the game as the artist was imagining what Nina and I looked like as kids, which I didn't need to do because these pictures exist. So. But it's totally inaccurate. So.
It's Diego in the middle, Aaron on the left, and me on the right. We're a squad of children. So we're going to play the game for you first, just in case people haven't played it, so you have some context for what the heck we're going to talk about, which is the game. Oh, Diego and I should play against each other because we're the characters.
Okay. Okay, so the idea is that we're two kids in our backyard playing soccer. The sort of conceit of the game is that if somebody gets hit too hard with the ball, they fall over and cry and are unable to play the game anymore unless the other player chooses to help them up. So it's like a little bit of a sportsmanship simulator, and also just like a chance for Nina and I to beat each other up. The best way to play is to knock the person over, get a point, and then be a good sport and help them up.
I found most people do that, which is interesting. Or you can just knock them down and score all the points until the game ends. You don't have to help someone up. It's up to you. So please observe while I score multiple points without helping Diego up.
This is a really good illustration of how mean you are.
Yeah. This is a game about being mean.
Thank you so much.
Wow, you're welcome. Aren't we such good friends?
No. Got her.
Don't put me in the goal.
I can't. I'm so bad.
Oh, and the dog is good. By the way.
The dog is named Helga. That's fully fictional.
And this game ends on a timer, so
There we go.
here we go. That's Mom yelling at us.
I can't make myself cry. Okay, so that's the game as it is now.
It is on a lovely arcade cabinet downstairs made by folks at Fantastic Arcade. Thank you to them. They did an amazing job. So you can play it on the arcade cabinet, which is cool, but we also obviously have it playing on controllers too for people on PC. So I guess we should talk about how we made it.
Yeah. Should we show the original?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so basically the beginning of the story of this game is that all three of us were actually in grad school together, sort of. We were at least in this one class together called Prototype Studio that Bennett Foddy teaches/taught at NYU, New York University. And in that class, we basically made a prototype a week for a semester. So each week there was a theme. So it was like a game jam a week, essentially, in class form. And I believe the week we did this game, the theme was sports.
Yeah, and this was the only week that we were allowed to work in pairs also.
Yeah. So Diego and I teamed up, and we were like, what sports? Well, I guess like one of the things that we have in common as designers is like making personal stuff and also having or like enjoying silly, humorous action games. Like I think basically this prototype came from like that overlap in our interests. Do you want to talk about like the personal stuff in it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like the personal stuff is like remembering being a kid and like the weird rules that you create as a kid, engaging in like a more free form play. So the idea originally wasn't really that it was a structured soccer game so much as like we found this ball and we're just killing time until dinner. And so I guess the place where it becomes like a little more about being a personal game is the whole like knockdown mechanic and it being sort of intentionally broken in that way.
And just like us being the characters and like the early conversations about it being like, what kinds of things did we do in our backyards as kids? And we were both like, oh yeah, we did like kickball or soccer or whatever, and engaged in teasing of friends. So it kind of comes from that.
Mean people. And then the other thing for me is whenever I think about sports games, I think about sitting at my friend's house as a kid playing the. Our favorite games were from the Neketsu series, the Kunio-kun series. So we would always be playing either Crash and the Boys Street Challenge or NES World Cup Soccer. And a big part of that game is you can do these super kicks and you can kick the ball into other players and knock them down. So the way we would play that game is repeatedly kick the ball at the members of the other team until they no longer stood up again, and then we would get in the lead, and then we would do that and try not to score because scoring would stand them back up.
So I guess we made the prototype. Darren, do you remember what you did for sports?
I absolutely don't.
It's okay. Yeah, we made a lot of games in that class, so I don't remember half of mine either. But anyways, we made the prototype, and we liked it, but we didn't want to, like, release it right away because we weren't, like, it was just a prototype. It was pretty buggy and unpolished and stuff, so we kind of set it aside for literally years because turns out
4 years.
Yeah, this was a while ago, 4 years or something.
Yeah, you can see Nina had pink hair when we first made this.
Yeah, long ago. So we basically, like, put it away. The original prototype was made, it was a Flash game, which is funny, too. Some good old ActionScript 3. Actually, using Flixel, I think, right? We used Flixel for
probably.
this. Yeah. So anyways, we put it away. We were like, oh, we'll do it someday. And then 4 years went by, and we still hadn't, like, shipped it or anything. And then, I don't know, is there anything else about the prototype that is interesting before I move to the...
No.
Okay.
It looks ugly.
Actually, no. The best part of it, I would like to highlight, is the original animation for getting knocked over, which I'm just going to like play this for the third time just to see it again. So
the lack of ball rotation.
The ball's too small. He's going to fall. It's good. We'll pause it on that. Oh no, he's up again. There we go. Okay, so cut to this past year. When I was approached by Fantastic Arcade to do a game, I was like thinking about arcade setting stuff and how I was like, if I'm doing an arcade setting game like on an arcade cabinet, I definitely am into the idea of making like a smaller, more action-y game that you can play with like a quick turnaround at like a party setting. So when thinking about that, I remembered this prototype and was like, oh, it'd be fun to like have a reason to finish that because I always thought it was pretty interesting mechanically. So then I reached out to Diego and Aaron and was like, let's revive the game and do it for this Fantastic Arcade. And then, Aaron basically took this prototype that we made, which could only run on my computer. So I took video of it and wrote this whole spec and whatever. And then you can talk a little bit about, I guess, what it was like for you taking like a prototype and you ported it basically to Unity.
Yeah, I basically just remade the original game into Unity as a starting point. So we had a sort of baseline. And then from there, we just changed a lot of things.
Yeah, I guess we did in the beginning iterate mechanically on some of the stuff, because like we prototyped the original one in a week, so we didn't really like iterate on the design at all originally. It was just like the one idea out the door, done.
Yeah.
So then early on, you two worked a bunch together to do some of the like early iterations when we were working on this.
Yeah, so one difference you notice between the prototype and the final version is, like, in this prototype, there's very clear ball possession. Like, if somebody touches the ball, it essentially becomes, like, parented to a point at their feet and just goes with them automatically. And actually, when talking again to Benefati about it, he was like, your screen's so small, you should just get rid of that. So we sort of went back and forth on that a lot, experimenting with whether or not people should actually be able to hold the ball, or if the control should be a little more floaty. And it ended up being, I think, a little better on the floatier side.
Yeah. Which we had ball possession for a while, but
Yeah.
I think it ended up being a little bit more confusing than it was worth, basically, because it was like never super clear. Like because since like in the game now the character sprites are pretty big and like the screen, the play space is a little smaller with Diego's new illustrations. We were like, oh, most of the time it's confusing as to who is actually holding the ball because players spend quite a bit of time like being pretty close to each other.
Yeah.
So then we changed it.
Yeah, and then you had wanted to do like intro and outro stuff, right?
Oh yeah. Okay, so yeah, some of the other early stuff, we have these storyboards I did that are
High tech.
with my bad drawing. I try to make storyboards for like every game that I work on, because I think they're really helpful just to like have sort of a like static version of like all the different movements that I want the game to go through. And usually like the like gameplay mechanical stuff just has like kind of one square on it, and I put a bunch of notes on it or whatever. So this is often how some of this stuff starts out for me, and I think probably you guys too have done storyboarding. So yeah, we originally had this whole like thing where we were gonna have like an intro cutscene, blah blah blah, which we didn't end up doing just because of scope. Wanted it to be smaller. But when I was doing the storyboard, I was out doing it. I was hanging out with Jake at Japanese Gardens in Portland. I was drawing it, and I was like, oh, we don't have like a really like interesting narrative way to like show the score, because if you think about kids playing backyard soccer, like there's no way a kid is going to be like paying attention exactly to how many points they have. Some kids might, but like I think generally kids are a little distractible. So, oh, thank you for, it's the dog I drew. I'm very talented, as you can tell.
Dog flower.
So I was like, okay, how do we have the score communicated in a way that like is narratively clear? And I was like, if the kids aren't going to keep the score, or I was like, well, the kids would like maybe lie about the score even, since this is a game like where you're teasing each other. So I was like, the only way to be fair about the score is if the dog keeps score, because I decided there should be a dog, because Jake was like, what about a dog? Why don't they have a dog? And I was like, that's a really good idea, actually. And then, as you can see, my whole concept, the whole design process was basically drawing that last square where it's a little stick figure dog that just says score. So now in the game, you saw us playing earlier, the dog is actually in the background the whole time, which was more Diego. Like, I don't know if you want to talk about the dog at all, but you were kind of the one who like decided he should be in it the whole time.
Yeah, I think that was partly a scope consideration. So we were thinking about like this whole cutscene sequence where the kids run into the house and then the dog walks over, and I think we just thought it would be simpler to have the dog always there and be able to just do it in one place. And then also I think the idea of, it's a little subtle, but every time someone scores in the game, the dog sort of like opens its one eye from sleeping in toward the goal that was scored.
And his little ear goes up.
Yeah.
And he's a whistle.
Yeah, at some point, an important iteration was turning his tongue into a whistle.
Because he whistles when one of the kids gets knocked over.
And the process for making that stuff was mostly like I had one big Photoshop with all of the stuff in it, and I would send GIFs back and forth on Slack to Nina and Aaron. So if this one will open properly. I also learned the folly of using convert all layers to frames in Photoshop when it turns out you're in a 200 frame Photoshop file. This took a really long time to export. But it's also really cool to see all my frames in one place.
It's so good. Let's see, what are some of the other design things we did? Oh yeah, I guess from early, in the original prototype, there was like the dinner time cutoff for the end of the game. We didn't really talk about how the game ends, right? Yeah, so in the original prototype, I think it was timed, and the idea was like the parent would yell for the two kids to come in and be like, hey, it's dinner, get inside, and that was how the game ends. Then when we were talking about it, when we were doing this version, we were like deliberating if it should end on a timer or if it should end based on like, first player to 10 points wins kind of thing. I don't know if you guys have thoughts about it.
I think like ultimately that decision also kind of came down to like emphasizing the childhood aspect and the personal aspect. So to have it be a game about scoring the most points feels a lot more like a traditional sports game. And even though ultimately it becomes that, I think even just removing the score from the screen and having the timer be an invisible timer, so mom like calls dinner, it feels like whenever. It just makes it feel a little more like that, like summer evening.
Yeah. Actually, for most of it, we didn't have any indication of score on the screen at all. And it was just like you would just score goals, and it would be like, you've scored. And then pretty late, I was like, oh, actually, it would be nice to at least see like +1 point or whatever, especially because you can like own goal yourself. So it's like helpful to have an indication, like if you score a point in the wrong goal by mistake because you lose track of which goal yours, there's at least something there to point you in the right direction. So that was kind of like the compromise of like having little information to convey what Diego was talking about, but having enough to guide the player to be able to score in a knowledgeable way.
Yeah, I think the one suggestion that we've been getting is we announce the winner as the player that got the most points, but it would be nice to then also reward the player that helped the other person up the most.
Yeah.
Although that also means they're the player that knocked the other person down the most, so
yeah.
mixed messages.
Let's see,
And then sound we could talk about?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So partway through the process, obviously we were like, we are going to have sound in this game. So that would be cool to do. Yeah. And I reached out to a friend, Amos Roddy, that Aaron and I have worked together with. He did also sound design for Kimmy, which is one of our other games. And yeah, Amos is awesome. His work's really cool. He's ToyXTree on Twitter. And he's another Portland person. I'm in Portland, they're in New York. And yeah, he did a bunch of iterations of music. This one is one of his first tracks he did that didn't make it into the game. So we figured we'd share a little bit of it. I love this song.
Yeah, this was an interesting process too, because we were trying to find the right balance between like dreamy nostalgia and like fast-paced sports game, and also like stupid, dumb cartoons, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this was like there on two axes, but maybe didn't feel goofy enough.
Oh yeah, and then he sent us the version. We like asked for another option of the song just because we were thinking about that stuff, and he sent us the current version in both its current form and like a slowed down form. So we used the slowed down version for the title screen, like a tracked mode screen, and then the normal version for the game, which kind of made it feel like, oh, a chill summary vibe on the start screen versus like a more upbeat like gameplay song. Oh, okay, we should play. Okay,
Yeah,
so
after music, the next step.
is sound effects. So we were like, oh, sound effects, what about that? What if, and Amos asked if we could record ourselves, like making some of the sounds that the characters would make, so like a kick sound or like you're getting hit by the ball sound. So Diego and I recorded some sounds, and we'll share with you the original.
Get ready for this.
Yeah.
It's going to be good.
So I should say we Skyped first,
Oh, yeah,
and we
yeah.
like talked about the general tone of the sounds we wanted, and I was fairly adamant that I didn't want too much like actual dialogue. I wanted to go the more like, I don't know, like Mario
Or like Animal Crossing.
yeah,
like, blah,
route
blah, blah,
of
blah.
like sounds that evoked tone. And so this is what Nina sent me. She recorded first, so this is what Nina sent me of the arguments that the kids were going to have at the end of the game. if I can use this trackpad.
You can do it.
I'm allergic. The only problem with playing this is that now I can't follow through on my threaten to blackmail you later in life.
Yeah, it's true. Oh, you have to play yours too.
Which one am I playing for me?
They're all pretty good.
Let's just do get hit.
Oh wait, it's chart. Okay, whatever. Yeah, that's fine.
Doof. Buh. Ow. Ow.
You should do one where you can hear the slow.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, wait, we'll do one more. One thing. One direction that we got from Amos was to do some versions of our sounds slowed down, so that sort of like Alvin and the Chipmunks style, he could speed them up and make us sound youthful.
Youthful.
Let's not set things up right
We're so old.
I'm a sprightly youth.
They can do the audio.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Is this one?
Yahoo. Get kick.
No, maybe it's not this.
Yeah.
Let's try another. We have time. You guys are gonna have to just listen to a lot
I
of
think
these.
that's a slow take.
No, but there was one where you
help
said
me,
a
help
thing.
me,
Yeah,
help
yeah,
me.
yeah, yeah. It's really funny. We listened to these like 20 times this morning.
Help. Help. Hey. Yeah. Oh. Owie. Owie. Owie.
There you go.
Come on. Come on.
It's so strange to say owie extremely slowly.
It's so good.
Okay, so then Amos would like take and process the files, and this is an example of one that didn't make it in.
Oh yeah.
Because it was, I think our main direction was it was like a little too anime.
And it's for the kick sound when the player kicks the ball.
Yeah, this is a combination of both charge up and kick.
Yeah. Charged kick.
I do think the fart sound is an extremely good. Let's just play it. Don't laugh too soon this time. Really nice.
Yeah. Amos came on before we had before Diego had all the animations done and stuff, so he was just, experimenting with some ideas and I think was trying to anticipate how Diego was going to animate certain things. And I guess he assumed you would make a very anime charge to kick animation.
No,
It kind of is. The ball glows red and goes wild.
That's true. It's a hot ball.
It's a hot ball. What else? Anything else about sound?
No. Oh wait, yeah. So the other thing that happened was I went to record with my friend,
Oh yeah.
and I was like, oh, now I have to do dog sounds, and I was like really nervous and embarrassed to do it in front of him, and he was like, oh, you mean like this, and just did a perfect dog. So I was like, okay, Andy, you're our dog now.
Thank you,
So
Andy.
here's some
Yeah, so
sounds.
unlike Cat, who actually recorded cats, we
Yeah.
just recorded ourselves.
Yeah, we just recorded Andy Brinkman. Thank you. He also made the brushes actually that I used to paint the sprites in the game. So, so these are sounds that didn't make it in also because this is the dog getting hit, which wasn't something that we decided against. We just didn't get to it.
dog sounds.
I did not tell him we were gonna play these.
Did you just realize that?
I don't even know if he knows we're giving a talk. He definitely doesn't
Okay.
know it's streamed on the internet.
As we just go into detail about how good of a dog sound he makes.
Okay, so I think at this point, should we just get people to play?
Do we have any more files to share?
I think we've shared all of our internet
Oh,
files.
well, the other thing I wanted to mention, just as far as like a mechanical iteration, because this is like a pretty simple game, so we did a fair amount of like testing out different things. So in the game, you can hold. Oh, there's Aaron. In the game, you can hold on Xbox controller A to run, and actually that wasn't in the game the whole time, and wasn't even in the original prototype. But basically, I was play testing and I was running around and I was like, oh, it feels kind of like not as fun to just like run at the same speed the whole time. Like it made the game feel kind of sticky to me. So I was like, often with like action-y games, you have some kind of dash or a jump or some kind of like movement ability. So I was like, oh, it would be interesting to try that, even though we hadn't really talked about it yet. So I think we went ahead and Aaron helped me put in a dash dash
Yeah, I
mode.
mean, we had a surprising amount of variation in the kinds of mechanics that we actually had.
Yeah.
Because, like, we had grabbing the ball, we had pushing the ball.
Oh,
had
yeah, you did
very
the push
many
ball.
different kinds of pushing and grabbing.
What was
we
the
had,
pushing stuff? Or like I guess we kind of have. It's kind of push ball now, but
Yeah.
there was like an earlier different version. That you
Yeah,
did.
we had, like, push ball. We had, like, in-between versions of it.
We had, like, dribbly kind of
Yeah,
stuff. right?
dribbling. We had dashing, and now we have running instead of dashing.
Yeah, and the dash was just like a burst of speed. So like you would press a button and shoot forward a little bit, but we never got it to feel quite like bursty. It always
Yeah.
felt kind of like too poppy.
Turns out it's really easy to kick the ball that way, too, so.
Yeah. So it felt kind of OP. So you would just basically like spam dash.
Yeah.
And,
just
like-
kick the ball into the goal that way, yeah.
Yeah, I guess we could have added like often games deal with that by having like a cooldown meter
Yeah.
basically.
But we wanted to avoid, like, adding all these extra mechanics to, like, prevent people from doing things. So
Yeah, it just seemed like it was overcomplicating it. So then one day I was like, sorry, Aaron, I'm putting it running on my own now.
Yeah, so I just, like, rewrote
Yeah.
the whole player controller. It's fine.
I felt bad. But it was worth it because I think
Yeah, no,
running
it's way
feels better because, like, I think the advantage after putting it in that we learned is that with dashing it felt too OP because you're just, like, dashing around and moving really erratically and pushing the ball, like, crazy that way. But whereas with running, we made it, or Aaron set up some colliders that when you're running fast, you kind of, like, push. You can't, like, run with the ball as easily, but you can, like, kind of, like, interrupt the ball from being kicked, for example, by running in the way. And then if you want to like slow down and aim, you can walk and like kick the ball that way. So it adds a little bit of variation to how movement works in the game, which I think feels pretty good in the end. And I don't know if you want to explain, like, I think the collider stuff is pretty cool, but to help differentiate between walking and running.
Yeah, it's hard to demonstrate without seeing it, but really it's just there's different colliders for different states so that you can't just easily push the ball around when you're running, and it's much smaller that way.
Yeah, so we're like changing the collider shape and type, and we did a lot of tuning on that to make it feel good and
Yeah.
make it so that running didn't feel as OP as dashing.
Tried a lot of collider shapes.
Yeah.
I think it's an octagon right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. And then when you're just walking, it's like a circle. I
Yeah, it's just like a
believe.
really tiny circle.
Yeah. So we made the game, and that was fun. And I think we're pretty happy with it. If you find any bugs, let us know. Yeah, it was fun to make another sports game. I guess Diego and I did one other arcade style game together called Bum Rush, which was a racing game about hooking up. And so it was fun to be able to like do another sports like game together because like normally I do mostly like narrative stuff because Aaron and I work at Fulbright, so the stuff we do there is pretty like first person, like slower paced usually narrative stuff that's like longer term playtime. So it's kind of refreshing to work on something like this that's just like quick feedback loop, play testing is going fast, we can kind of do it ourselves. It was like a pretty fun iterative process, like being able to try out all those different mechanics really fast too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and maybe if some people want to play, we can do questions and have people playing at the same time.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, I think that sounds great. If you want to play Grass Stains, come on up here. And then if you have questions for the developers, go ahead and put your hands up, and I will run over to you, and you can ask them stuff. And also, a quick round of applause. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, they can play.
Yeah.
All right, I think we have a question already.
Yeah.
Although it might be easier on the computer.
Can you pet the dog, and if not, when?
Can you pet the dog?
The question was, can you pet the dog? And if not, when?
Tomorrow morning. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I mean, we had like you saw the storyboard before, and like there was a bunch of stuff. Like there was even actually a sequence at the end where like the dog starts to walk off screen with you, and we wanted you to be able to like spam the help button as the player and have like the kids yelling at each other at the end of the game. But we ended up scoping it down a lot so that we could have time to iterate on the like ball mechanics itself. So we actually cut a lot in order to like make the game feel better.
Yeah, I think some things that I wasn't ready for was like, first of all, doing these higher res. I'm usually a pixel artist, so I'm doing higher res sprites for the first time in a long time, and trying to replicate like a layered colored pencil feel. So those took me like a lot longer than I was ready for. So a lot of the dog functionality never got there, and also just figuring out how to like animate a soccer ball that rotates the right way and the right speed was like kind of an interesting new challenge for me. So.
Okay, we got another question.
So, was there any discussion about? So right now you can only kick the ball, but was there any discussion about kicking the other player?
Oh, yeah.
So
A
kicking
bunch of
them
people
down.
have asked us about that. I think, well, right now actually you can literally kind of use the ball to drag the player around, which is, I guess, a bug, but we chose to leave it in. We didn't have kicking the other player in the original game, and I feel like it seemed like a given that we wouldn't do it because then the game would become less about soccer probably and more about just knocking each other over. And we wanted there to be like a balance to, it's a sports game, but it has this like sportsmanship element, and not have the like balance tip too far towards like the kids messing with each other.
Yeah, and I think part of also what we're going for is like, I think there's like a weird social moment as a kid when you like, somebody gets hurt and it's like maybe your fault but not really, and you don't know how to act in that moment.
Yeah.
So I think like having people just kicking each other in the shins felt a little too intentionally
Yeah.
cruel.
And we got another question over here.
I was curious if there were any inspirations, either games or not games, that used for the sort of crayon style.
Yeah, actually, oh god, I'm gonna forget the name of it. There's like a music toy by Froach Club that is colored pencil style that Jenny Joshua has been showing me a lot because we're teaching an animation class together this semester. And I wanted it to feel like a kid's drawing kind of. So I looked at the way they sort of had this layered colored pencil style and used that as inspiration for some of the coloring. It's Y button to help, but you don't have to. And then like otherwise visually, yeah, just World Cup Soccer. It's my favorite game. The sprite when Nina kicks the ball at me is like a direct reference to when you hit someone in that game with the ball.
You can see it on the cabinet, like where the title is, Diego put that sprite in the cabinet art. It's like his eyes are like breaking his glasses. It's extreme.
Yeah, and the shirt goes from saying turtle to saying Doof! Other thing that I learned while making this game was don't write on a sprite that you're going to be flipping like regularly during the game. But it was a lesson learned too late.
Savage.
I should have written SEO trot.
Do we have another question? Oh, here we go.
Speaking of the turtle shirt, are the shirts based on actual like inspiration of like shirts you had in your childhood of like the shooting star or Nina, or like Why does it say turtle?
A couple years ago, I went to Japan, and someone offered to take me to the Ghibli Museum with their son, and their son wore a shirt that had a turtle on it and just said turtle in big letters, and I think that's very funny. And then for Nina's shirt, I think I just was looking through Nina's Facebook at her fashion style and trying to figure out how to put that on a kid, like a 90s kid.
Yeah. I would have definitely worn that shirt.
I did briefly look into printing those shirts for this event. But.
Would have been so good.
Any more players? We can take a couple more people are more than welcome to come up. And also, does anyone else have any questions? Oh, here we go.
With the references, I'm wondering when it's those World Cup soccer and those Crash and the Boys, they're at the perfect age right now that some people are gonna get them, some people aren't, and I'm just wondering when do those fade out, and what's the what's the right age for things to be ripe? What's next?
I think
We're
that
oh no, you can't use that anymore, or people just don't know, so you can use whatever you want now.
I think my answer to that question is that I'm self-absorbed, and those references are there for me and me alone. But it is interesting. I teach high schoolers game design, and it's always weird when a lot of kids don't know what. I don't know, Halo's a bad example, but they I'll mention a game that I feel is a benchmark game, and they'll have no idea about it. And then I'll mention Jet Set Radio, and they'll be like, oh yeah, that game's awesome, but they've actually never played it. They just watched YouTube videos of it. So yeah, I think it's just I don't know, a later generation becomes the classic games that you reference. You see that in indie games, right? People are starting to abandon pixel art and go for the PS1 era low poly.
This just reminds me, one of the references when we were doing sound work, one of the references I gave Amos was Mario Party soccer games, because I actually really like Mario Party mini games, and there's quite a few Mario Party soccer games, and I found this YouTube compilation of just every Mario Party soccer game ever, and I thought the sound design for those was pretty simple, low key, and matched pretty well to what we were trying to do, so a lot of the us making the voice sounds and whatnot kind of was drawn from Mario Party stuff and me watching those videos. So that was partially an inspiration, just as a note.
Were there other games that you guys were looking at in terms of, earlier you said it, we put this in, but it's broken. And this is a thing that I feel has come up on a bunch of designs that I've worked on in the past, where you're well, we have to do this thing, and it's weird, nobody does it, you don't normally do it, and if you leave it in there, then the game is technically busted, but also it doesn't work and it's not good if that's not in there. Were there things where you felt, were there other games that you had played that made you feel really confident about doing kind of a weirder, or a riskier design choice like that?
I don't remember. So I think the main broken mechanic that is a very deliberate mechanic is the fact that you can knock the other player down and never help them up, and then the one person basically just automatically wins. You always have a choice if you knock someone down to just win, because you can just leave them there. And I think, I'm not sure I can think specifically of any inspirations we had for that, because we were really kind of just thinking back on youth and the idea of playing fair or playing unfair. So we were definitely mostly drawing on real life experiences for that mechanic.
I think in this case it kind of fits with the sports theme, because again, when you're playing offline real life games, you're managing it yourself. So, and also I just remember a lot of the kids games that I used to play were definitely not balanced and were definitely broken, but
Yeah.
we figured out how to make sure that they're playable still.
Especially when it's house rules style stuff. I was definitely thinking about that stuff early on, where it's when you're playing, whether you're a kid or an adult, often when you play physical games with people, there'll be house rules, and those can often unbalance a game like even like people will like have house rules for games that wouldn't otherwise be broken and then break them because they have more fun that way. So I think it's kind of a focus on that sort of like real human aspect of it.
But it is something we struggled with a little bit because I think a lot of games that do like sort of intentionally break themselves are maybe like a little closer to like a capital A art game. And we did also want this to be legitimately competitive. So we talked about things like if you don't help the player up, after a while they'll like get up in aggro mode and be better as a result of you not helping them. But it's weird because then it's incentivizing you to do the thing that we don't want it to be incentivized.
Yeah.
So.
And I think it's more interesting in the arcade setting because there are two human bodies playing the game in the arcade. So I think we also thought about that where we were like, oh, they're going to actually deliberate this mechanic in person. And like I was playing with Jake and I knocked him over and wouldn't get him back up and he just pressed the help button on himself. Like he reached over and pressed it. So like I think we also wanted to like open up opportunities for that kind of stuff to happen because it's meant to be played in an arcade setting.
Hi. My question was sort of along those same lines. You sort of touched on it, but with this mechanic, like it's just really interesting how you can help them or leave them, how competitive you are. So did you learn anything about each other while making this game, and like how, based on how you play with that choice, or does everyone have like a style that they do?
I'll say that I didn't play this game with Nina until we got here because we were making this remotely. I'm in New York and Nina's in Portland. Aaron's in New York with me, so we played like a little bit, but no.
Yeah, I'd say we worked on this mostly at night in isolation. So I played a lot with Jake because we lived together, but otherwise we only played it together for the first time at this.
Yeah.
Although I guess Diego and I played the prototype together.
Yeah.
We joke about how we were mean. I guess we learned that.
But I don't know, there's something about playing it where it really does feel too mean to not help the other person.
Yeah.
It kills the fun of the game, right? It stops being a game if you don't help them up. So it
It
kind
feels
of
like
works.
there's like little like burning to coven feeling kind of thing in there about like if you knock them down one time, you don't actually get to play anymore, and there's that weird kind of like voluntary like a lot of competitive games are like more cooperative than we normally acknowledge. I feel like But I was wondering if there was a time when, is there a specific time that you can remember being like knocked down and someone scoring like 10 goals on you? Is there like a very specific thing that this is trying to?
I haven't often seen anyone score. Like, I think what tends to happen is someone knocks someone over for the first time. It's really funny. They score. It's even funnier. And they're like, oh, the game doesn't make you get up?
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. And then maybe they'll do it one more time, but then it feels awkward really quickly.
But I do think like in real life as a kid, I remember moments where like somebody got hurt while we were playing a game and I felt guilty about it but didn't know what to do. So I just kind of like milled around and did my own thing until they got over it.
Or you like get a teacher and like don't actually deal with it yourself.
Yeah.
I remember I was playing or trying to play kickball and one of the like toughest sports boys in the school kicked the ball at me and it just nailed me in the stomach and like totally I was sent flying. I definitely thought about this when we were working on it.
Yeah, I got hit by a basketball by also one of the toughest sports boys, and it was in gym class and like it hit me in the side of the face and my glasses flew off and just slid like all the way across the gym.
Oh no, that's so sad as a kid.
And he shook my hand, but I was like, "You're a mean person, so I don't believe that this is an accident."
Yeah.
It probably was an accident.
Yeah, that guy just
that
walked
mean.
away from me. I don't think I ever even talked to him.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Let's have a quick round of applause.
Thanks for having us.
And Grass Stains is available as part of the Fantastic Arcade Bundle on itch.io, and it's also playable in an absolutely beautiful cabinet downstairs right now. And then I think what we're going to do, starting in just a few minutes, is have the second Jar Wars tournament